Plugged In dives deep into the ever-evolving world of technology with a special emphasis on how it intersects with our daily lives, businesses, and the broader society. Guided by Mark Sefton, a globally renowned personal mentor to entrepreneurs and a passionate technophile, this podcast unravels the complexities of the tech world, offering listeners insights that are both profound and practical. With Mark's rich experience, having interviewed some of the most influential individuals across various platforms, expect to embark on a journey of discovery, innovation, and digital mastery. Welcome to Plugged In.
I want to welcome you to the Plugged In podcast, and today I'm joined by Greg Whalen. Greg is the CTO of Prove AI and a leading authority on enterprise AI governance, helping organizations move AI from experiential to trusted production-ready systems. It's great to have you on today's show, Greg.
Great to be here. Thank you.
We're already nearing like the last month of the first quarter of the year. It's crazy where the time's gone.
I don't know. Yes, things are moving awfully fast in the space, especially. So it's tough to keep up.
Well, that is definitely true with AI. I think every day there's a new advancement, something different, isn't there? Do you feel like a sense of being out of control, even though you're very much in AI every day?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much out of control is the feeling. It's just that there's so many new developments that turn out to be really important over the course of a month or two, right? So you might look at something and says, "Hey, that's interesting. Maybe I'll come back to that in next year." And then you realize that 2 months later, it's already a thing and it needs to be prioritized. You need to pay attention to it. That's definitely different than working with other software trends, right? The sheer speed at which things go. So it's not so much out of control. It's just trying to pick the right things to focus on is really hard.
Do you feel like AI found you, Greg, or you found it?
I'd have to say I found it because I started such a long time ago in the late 90s. So that was at the time, I think AI was kind of interesting, but it wasn't applied to many real world problems, right? So, it didn't have quite the flash and the potential for earnings and all of these things that we know about today, right? It was, I come from a world where we're not talking about generative AI, right? We're talking about just plain old predictive machine learning. Not that this was still a big and hard topic at the time, right? And we're talking about, hey, are there ways to run these algorithms, these computationally expensive algorithms over my database? How are we going to do these things? At a simple regression over a few gigabytes of data was an ordeal. And we've come certainly a long way at this point. But I was attracted to it early on just for the potential applications, specifically in healthcare, to an extent in music as well. But certainly that was me going into an area that there really wasn't an immediate sort of need for, right? It was very experimental. It was very, hey, maybe we can do something. But I mean, there are some very severe limitations on like how you could actually compute and solve these problems, right? And those barriers have largely been removed by now. And people who go into it now, I think, go into it with the assumption they're going to be using it for something useful, but that's really not what I was doing, back at the time.
Yeah, you have a love of music, do you, Greg?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. So I studied it as an undergraduate major, and certainly it's something that I still enjoy doing.
Any particular music in particular that you really like?
Yeah, so I was a brass player, so think low brass, primarily, tuba. I did play some of the higher brass like trumpet, but I think I was always best at the low end. Yeah, so that was what I did my practical study in during my undergraduate degree. And yeah, I think I also did a bunch of composition at the time, right? Much of which was algorithmic composition and things of that nature. So right, there's that very clear overlap between things like grammatical structure, generative grammars, music, language, right? That all overlap very heavily with AI, right?
Yeah.
And that's the space that I was playing in at the time.
Very good. Now, Greg, you said that the real blocker to enterprise AI isn't model quality, but telemetry. What are the most companies getting fundamentally wrong here?
Yeah, absolutely. So they underestimate how hard it's going to be to productionalize something. So going from good to great is the mistake, right? People look at something and say, hey, it looks like you've gotten 80% of the way there, right? Based on a prototype or based on something they're looking at. In reality, you're probably 20% of the way there. Getting from an okay solution with some very big landmines, right? So, okay here in this case means, hey, it does something I've never seen technology do before. That's pretty impressive. But then there's also those very large, very dangerous landmines, right? Hallucinations, things like that. Things that have a very high blast radius, things that are very damaging, and things that need to be controlled. But companies are looking at that sort of initial promise and saying, "Hey, cool, we're almost there. Just keep doing what you're doing, and we should be ready to go pretty soon." Right? That's fundamentally mistake number one. Mistake number two then is saying, okay, well, let's just bang through this and let's cut corners, right? Let's not do this the right way. Let's just get to production and let's just get it out there, right? The rush and the feverish sort of pace to try to get something done and something deployed is causing bad decision making, right? It's causing people to miss the hardest part of generative AI, which is that telemetry collection, which is the observability, which is ultimately figuring out how am I going to run this thing at scale and how can I be sure that it's performing at the level that I need it to be as a business. That's the fundamental mistake. People that they're in POC land and right they forget that they're going to be judged by whether the solution is great, not good. And you're nowhere near great if you're skipping all of the hard steps along.
Yeah, really important, I think, process to not miss out some of the fundamental components here. As AI systems become more autonomous and opaque, what is proving what your AI is doing now as critical as maybe something like cybersecurity or financial controls?
Yeah, sure. So it's so that you know what your systems are doing and that you know how to manage it. So it's like, focusing on there's a few ways that people try to manage generative AI, right? They sort of say "Well, it's a black box, right? There's generative AI, it makes responses, right? You ask it questions, it makes responses. And people like to focus on that little non-deterministic thing and try to micromanage it and put it in a little box, establish guardrails, and just go all over like, let's just try to manage the heck out of this thing. And in the process, you end up destroying its functionality. Sometimes you make it better, but a lot of times that's not the right solution at all. That's probably the most common way that people just get razor focused on this like, really non-deterministic piece and they forget about the rest of their software life cycle. Right? They forget that, okay, well, really, do you care about the actual answers or do you care about, the actions it's taking? Do you care about, building a software system that you have full observability into? That should be your primary goal. So like, in terms of financial transactions, et cetera, by focusing on those things is again missing all of these things are missing the actual thing you should be paying attention to, which is this is my solution. I own it. I know every piece of it and how it works. And I've designed it such that when some of it goes off the rails, it recovers and I don't need to wake up at night and I don't need to worry. Right. So that's what you should be proving, right? Prove I understand how this works. Right. Prove that I have, an absolute control, visibility, and audit log of my end-to-end AI application. For people who are talking about, well, let's focus on the transactions it makes and make that the thing we control, or let's control the questions and answers, right? That we're feeding into these things. Those are all easier ways to proceed, right? Because it narrows the scope. You get to focus on one little thing. Cool, right? Everybody's like, yes, this is what we should focus on. Yeah, but you're ignoring the hard problem, right? You're ignoring what you should be doing, which is you should be building a software system that has a non-deterministic component and that is highly resilient and that you could at any time be confident that you understand, how it's working, how it's failing and how it's recovering, just like we've built cloud software, right? And that's, you know, there's analogies here. Like if you're going to be focused on the transactions it makes, like who in today's world would build cloud software where you say, let's ignore all of the logs and let's ignore all of the underlying software behavior. Let's only focus on uptime, right? Or something like that. That's going to be what we're going to do. We're going to prove whether, the software is up or not up, right? Sure. I mean, it sounds easy. And I'm sure at some point, people did that. That's going to be the metrics of success. But again, that, in today's world, we would realize that you can't do that because right, the right thing to do is solve the hard problem, which is ultimately getting your observability under control and fully owning your AI system.
You were earlier talking a little bit about AI governance. And I know you talk a lot about this anyway through other publications, and I've seen it, even on your own website. But talking about AI governance needing to move out of the slide decks and into production, what does that really look like operationally? Like operational governance actually look like in practice?
Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest change is that it's a capability that your organization has to adopt. And a lot of it is going to be software engineering led, right? Or maybe product led rather than policy led. So when we say get it, what we have to see happen with this, governance is that ultimately the people who are building this stuff and the people who are responsible for it, are still typically technical individuals. Technical could be engineers, could be non-engineers, right? But either way, they're the individuals building it. And governance really has to sit primarily, it's something that they have an active stake in. It's something that they own because it's their solution, right? And they have to be able to, to ultimately talk to other people, the other people that are using, maybe their customers, maybe their internal stakeholders. They have to have productive conversations about what governance means and what governance doesn't mean, right, to the people who are leading this, right? But it's not, there's an attempt or a previous attempt to sort of run this in reverse where, a bunch of people who are the end consumer, they want to know, hey, how are we governing this, right? And I have all of these governance needs. And I think where we've gotten to now a couple of years later is that, right, those individuals, they didn't really have governance needs. They had expectations of an application, and what they wanted was visibility and transparency. They didn't actually want governance because they couldn't articulate what they meant by governance, right? So if you don't know what you mean by governance and you don't even know enough about AI to explain what you mean by governance, then that's a very difficult discussion to have. It goes nowhere. It goes in circles, a bunch of people sitting in a room together saying, yeah, talking in circles about stuff, right? It's just, no fault of anybody. It was a sensible way to get started, but it just doesn't work because the depth of knowledge around what your AI system is and how it behaves drives so much of what you mean by governance that it just means that the individuals building it are going to be the ones who have to lead it. And operationally, that's what's different, right? That's what's changed. And then those people then say, okay, well, how can we make this governable, right? And you have to then work backwards from, well, how does this software supposed to work? What do we consider good? What do we consider bad? What do we consider great? What's acceptable? What's unacceptable? And then how do we have the visibility to share with the people that I do work with that this is in fact working as expected, right? Because there's always going to be those one or two question and answer pairs that go way off the rails. If we have an expectation that there's going to be a 0% hallucination rate and a non-deterministic system is always good, right? That's probably a bad expectation, right? There will be failures, and the magic will be correcting those failures and catching them before they ever impact a customer or a user, right? But under the hood, just like every other software in a non-deterministic space, you have to design around these things, and you have to, be able to make the system reportable and observable to the extent that it's happening, it's getting fixed, and you know when you have to get paged and wake up, and when you don't have to. So that's the key thing that's changed a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing how personable AI has become, and actually our definition of what something may mean to us may differ from one person to another, right? Which is what you're really getting at here.
That's right.
Now we have a lot of developers that listen to this show. So for developers listening, Greg, how has generative AI changed their responsibility, especially when it comes to observation, audibility, and trust?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I think that the key thing is that the sort of the business needs, the business outcomes, right, really are getting pushed down more levels back onto the engineers building this stuff, right? So it's become increasingly difficult to collaborate with other people, other non-technical individuals. And non-technical is just anybody who doesn't build stuff, right? Anybody who's not close to building. So if you compare this to traditional software, right, there's lots of people out there who have a very good understanding of how software is built, but do not actually build software, right? And huge sea of people, I've worked with some very talented people in the space, right? They admittedly don't want to build software, right? They don't want to really be close to the process, but they're very effective in their roles, right? Because they have a good understanding of how stuff is built. the generative AI world, the problem is that the way that generative AI solutions are built are very different, right? The tooling is different. The error control is clearly very different. The observability is very different, right? It's one of those things where it's very tempting to go into these things and say, well, it's software. How different can it be? And it turns out if you're going to do it correctly and you're really going to get to production, you have to change an awful lot of stuff about
Mm,
how you typically develop software. Everything's changed, right? You're going to hear all of these tool sets that nobody's ever heard of before. They're not going to do exactly as you expect. They're going to be new, meaning they don't always work, right? And all of these things just drive people up the wall who haven't built generative AI because they just keep looking at you saying, no, that can't be true, right? What do you mean that tool doesn't work? I hear about it all the time, right? And it's like, yeah, and it's not ready. It doesn't do that. And then somebody will go and look at a website and say, but the website says it does that. And you say, I don't know what to tell you. I just used it. Go look at Reddit. Go look at this documentation. Everybody complains about it. We need a workaround for it. And you get into these circular arguments with individuals. And really what it's netted out to for people who have gotten to production is people have to make a decision. Are they going to get into the details about generative AI building, or are you going to walk away? And if you walk away and you just say, I don't want to do this, that's fine. But it means you can't really be part of the decision making anymore, right? You can't really be somebody who says, I want to define the outcome metrics. I want to talk about what good is versus not good is. I want to do all these things, but I don't want to be in the details, right? That can't work anymore. So what
mm,
happens is all of that decision making has been pushed down the ladder to the people who have elected to get into the details, right? So you end up with a lot more responsibility on your Gen AI engineers or your AI engineers, right? People who have to say, all right, well, now I need to really think through like what would good be for our end user? What would great be for our end user? Right.
mm,
Let me understand the business, parts of this. Let me understand the cost metrics, right? How many tokens should we be burning? Should I burn through $10,000 on an evals run or not? Right. Those decisions become an engineer's decisions at this point. That's not typical, right? That's we're drifting into a world where people are just like, I wouldn't have had somebody say, hey, it's your call if you're going to, burn this much money on something like a test set, right? That's very uncomfortable for a lot of AI engineers, and that's the biggest operational challenge that exists, right? It's because those individuals who want to be part of the process but have elected not to get into the details, they're really left with only option is walk away. Otherwise, they make a mess, right? They reference things on the web. They talk about news articles that they've read. They try to run it like traditional software, and all it does is frustrate everybody because nothing works exactly as you'd expect. And even if it did, every couple of months something else comes up, and you end up saying, "Oh my, what's this? What's this tool?" Or "Oh, what's this new foundation model?" Right? And it's a very fast, on the spot decision that an AI engineer needs to make. Like, do we evaluate this technology or do we not? Because if I evaluate it, it's going to be another 3 months of work for me. I don't have time, right? I'm under the gun to operationalize whatever I'm working on. I just don't have time for this. Yeah, that's what's I think the biggest difference operationally. It's a lot of that decision making. The rest of it, right? There's plenty of technical stuff that operationally changes as well, but that's going to be very specific to your application and to your organization, right? What's the biggest challenge is just that, ownership is really shifting, right? People walk away, they opt out. And, all that does is it just throws everything down the rung onto the people who are doing it.
Now, Greg, you've described observability and telemetry, and code generation as the backbone of serious Gen AI applications. Why are these no longer optional?
Yeah, sure. So it's not optional just because if you're going to deploy it, if you're really going to operationalize a generative AI solution, right? That's your goal is to get your generative AI solution to production. Ultimately, get to great, not good. Right? And have people look at this and say, wow, this application is sort of game changing, right? I mean, that's usually the very high bar that people expect from a generative AI solution, which also is troublesome to work around, but expectations are very high. If they're like, oh, cool, you're going to use generative AI. I bet you could solve problem X, right? They're not going to say, hey, that's pretty good and end it there. The expectation is it's great, right? It needs to be great. It needs to be something that is a mini revolution. That's sadly, the plate that, people are being dealt with. Engineers are being dealt with. They're being dealt very, very high expectations, right? So the thing that is not optional then, right? It starts with that observability and telemetry, collection, because if you don't do that, even if you did get to great, you're not going to be able to fully support it and continue having it be great, right?
Right.
So, look at this all through the lens of what will people expect from you, right? And if they expect a really good, great solution, then working backwards from that implies that you really need to know, how to operationalize the heck out of this, right? That every step in the process, that you have safeguards in place, that you understand which parts are deterministic, which are not, right? And then when something does go wrong, and there is something that you're able to react to those types of things, right? And kick off processes that don't take a 2-week investigation, right? What will kill you is there's 5 wrong answers or 5 bad answers out of 10,000. Those are the things that people are saying, this application is not great because I heard that this person put in this question, or they did this with the application, and your Gen AI just went off the rails and did something nuts, right?
Mm.
That's going to be how, your solutions are often judged, even if it got another 10,000 that were great, right? People are going to focus and harp on those things that are just way out of bounds, right? Those just, off-band answers. So just think it through then. Okay, if those are the things that are going to prevent you from getting from good to great, then do you really, think through how long is it going to take you to debug 1 or 2 conversation strands? Is it 30 seconds? Probably not. You know, it might be hours, it might be days, right? And just work backwards. Like if there's even just a few of these per day, how are you going to do anything other than troubleshoot stuff? If you really end up having to look manually for logs, you have to go replay stuff yourself. Also, you could debug 6 or so off the rails transactions or things each day. You're not going to get any work done. And if you're not going to get any work done, your application's never going to get to great, right? And if it never gets to great, there's not going to be any additional investment, and there's not ultimately nobody's going to say you're done, right? You're not ready for deployment, right? And for some organizations, that means, hey, you're going to be considered to have failed, right? Even though your application might be very, very good. So that's why it's not optional, right? And people tend to skip this. They say, let me get the prototype out. Let me impress people. And then I'll come back and I'll figure out all of this hard work around telemetry, operational. It's a later thing. It's phase 2. We'll do it later. That's what the mistake is, right? That it's an error because you'll get into this long tail of fixes where nobody's willing to say, nobody thinks that you'll ever get to production because they keep seeing errors. And then they won't give you additional resources for anything. And you'll get crushed under the sort of operational load or debt, right? That's coming in as you're trying to frantically fix things, right? Because you didn't set this up to begin with. And then you'll find that there's no tooling out there. And then all of the traditional observability tools don't typically work for you, right? And you're going to go down sort of a doom spiral here around, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all of this? Do I really have to build this myself? And it's just, if you didn't do this and you did this up front and you planned this up front, then none of this would have been a problem.
I mean, the word observability is a mouthful, and yet you say it like so easy. I was like, I made an absolute car crash of saying it. It's not even a word that I've overly heard so much.
Yeah, no, I guess I remember it. I've used it an awful lot in the last couple of years, not even in the Gen AI space, just in the software space, right? And as a CTO in other high availability systems, you do talk about observability quite a bit. It's a recent term just to map all of the activities and the stuff that you do for ops, right? So for technical operations, for support activities, into something very specific about, like, do I really have the information available to support this application, right? So it becomes a whole like work stream, or it becomes a whole activity that your teams can get around because it's a bit more precise, right? We're not talking about fixing things. We're not talking about time to resolution. We're not talking about tickets. We're talking about, is the system observable or not? And right, do I have the information I need at any given time to troubleshoot, to diagnose, and to understand what it's doing? You're right. It's like, I didn't personally, I didn't start seeing the word used that often. I'm sure it has been in other high availability systems, but it became a word that became more frequently used just to describe an activity, right? Or a bunch of work that I need to do to make sure that, whoever needs to do stuff to my application, they have the information they need to take action, right? That I don't have to contact somebody else. I don't need to spin up an SRE. I don't need to go have somebody dive into logs, right? It's just there, right? And
Mm.
it becomes a detached activity when in the past it was all about ticket resolution or it was about, all of this various stuff here. Now we just say the objective is observability, right? We want the software to be observable. And there's going to be lots of people that consume this, but let's stop polluting our work with like what the actual usage of the observability data is. Let's focus on just making the software observable because 5 or 6 parties are going to want to use that observability to do that work, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I think the word has gotten,
Yeah.
more used.
We're right in the middle of quarter one, beyond even halfway through. Looking beyond that, Greg, what should CTOs really be looking at, and especially engineering leaders, when they're looking at what they should be prioritizing right now, if they want really their AI systems to scale safely and survive in the long term, what should they be doing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's two parts to this. One is that I'd advise everybody to get deep into the details. So this is sort of is a high level answer, but I think that if people are really serious about this, it includes CTOs, right? This is one of the few times that I've found that it's just getting really hands-on and doing some stuff yourself really pays dividends in the space, right? I think there's a natural inclination to say, oh, come on, how hard can this be? How different can this be from software that I've been doing? I haven't had to do this in the past. Why would I have to do it now, right? So CI/CD pipelines come out. I mean, do I need to do that myself as a CTO? Probably not. I mean, you could probably say, yeah, I get it. All right. You can effectively manage it. With Gen AI, I don't think that's really a good idea or the case. I think it actually means go spin up a Gen AI pipeline. Yes, do some coding assistance. Yes, do all of this stuff to really understand how different stuff is. So I mean that's sort of area number one that changes, right? The knowledge has to get pushed again down, right? So you're going to have to make a decision. Do you really want to get hands on and into the details of this stuff or not? Because if not, it's going to be very difficult to manage anything, right? Or even participate. So, like as CTOs and down to engineering managers, all of those people will need to make a decision. Is this like, do I want to play with Gen AI or not? If yes, you need to clear a bunch of time in your schedule to go get into the details of this. Go build again because it's not really that hard, I would say. I mean, there's easy ways to do it and get started with it, right? Without having to invest a lot of training. It will burn time though. Like no joke, right? It will burn a lot of time. And that's what kills a lot of people, right? They say, how hard can this be? Let me clear the next 2 hours between meetings. Surely I can go get into this. Yeah, it's still hard. Yeah, you're talking like you know, clear big old 4 hour blocks in your calendar for several days in order to really do stuff. And not everybody has that luxury, but that's really going to be what it takes. And I think that there should be a mental decision. Do I want to do this or do I not? And if you do, you're going to have to make time for this. So that's area one. Area two, you can expect what I'm going to say is get your telemetry in order before you start too far in the process, right? Think backwards from what are you expecting to get out of this? Don't just POC stuff, right? What are the actual business outcomes that matter, right? Nobody's going to tell you this because of everything I just said, right? Your stakeholders, your customers, they're not actually going to tell you what great is. They're not going to be able to articulate it. So you can't do your POC and say, "Hey guys, what do you think? Is it good enough?" They're not going to know. They're not going to know. They're going to look at you and say, "I don't know. What do you think?" And then, well, it did something bad, so I guess it's not good. I guarantee none of you want to be in that situation. It's a terrible situation to be in. So you say, let's avoid that situation. Nobody's going to tell me what great is. Before I start this POC, let me figure out what great is, right? And let me do some of the work that maybe I haven't had to do in the past as an AI, as an AI engineer or as a manager, and sort of say, okay, what would great really be as a business outcome, not as a technical metric, just as success metrics or something like that, something that's observable, computable, reportable. How would I set performance goals for this? How would I set cost goals, right? So even if I know what great is, great at what cost, right? What am I realistically willing to burn? What do I think? That means a deep dive right into the business case and the investment case. All stuff that as an engineer, you probably didn't have to do before. I would recommend trying to figure that out. Again, nobody's going to tell you. You're not going to be able to call somebody and say, is $10,000, a month in burn too much for this? Nobody's going to know. So, thinking that through. And then once you've gotten those things, say, well, how would I actually collect all of the information needed to compute these metrics? How would I actually structure this to collect these metrics? Where will I put them? And then how will I make it such that they are always available, always something that I can go tap into, show and understand that when metrics go down, trend downward, that I have an immediate resolution path to understand what to do next. What's my next best action? Right? Should it be a deep dive? Should it be a debugging session? Should it be a handoff? Do I need to spin up a little incident and, talk to some other engineers? Or is it simply that I want to know how this is solved, how I solved this in the past? Do I simply want something like that, right? So think about what you would actually do as a Gen AI engineer, because in a lot of cases, the software out there is not very respectful for your use cases, right? So me as an engineer, I know what I want. I want to look at something and say, okay, these are some bad answers or bad outcomes, or, on average, things are trending a little bit. Do I have time to look at this today or not? Should I look at this today or not, right? Something that gives me guidance on, is there something to do today or not, right? And then if there is something to do today, is it a 4-hour problem? Is it an 8-hour problem? Or is it a 30-minute problem? Because that's going to change how I look at this type of stuff in this world. It's very different than a traditional software system running at scale, where there's alarms, there's thresholds, there's breaches, there's run books, right? And there's an established sense of an on-call and things like that, or maybe an SRE or a DevOps team. It's just you're not going to have that. So if you don't, you just have to plan for advance that you're going to be semi in production or fully in production without the luxury of thresholds, alerts, alarms, because they're nearly impossible to set for a lot of cases. So you better have the observability to do all of those actions yourself. And if you don't do that up front, then you're going to be in a world of pain as you get close to operationalization and close to production.
Greg, it's been great to have you on the Plugged In podcast. How do people find out more about you and your business?
Yeah, sure. So I encourage everybody to go to proveai.com. We just released our initial curated free observability stack consisting of open telemetry and Prometheus. We will, of course, be launching additional stuff very, very quickly in the troubleshooting and remediation space. We have not released that yet, but that should come in the coming months. But for now, anybody's free to go look at a curated version of some observability stuff out there. It's free and downloadable. And we do have a SaaS dashboard that will help you with some initial observability reporting. So again, proveai.com, go ahead, take a look. At this point, all the software that we have out there is freely available and open to use. So, there's no harm for each of you to go there and check it out.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to me, Mark Sefton, host of Plugged In on the Smart Tech Daily podcast. We'd be delighted if you'd leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the next episode of the Plugged In podcast.